What the hell is this? That was probably my first reaction when I saw Super Animal Royale, and honestly, I completely understand why. It doesn't exactly scream serious competitive battle royale, but after actually playing it, I've got a completely different opinion, because somehow this stupid looking little game has got its hooks in me, and the more I play it, the more I'm starting to think Super Animal Royale might be one of the most underrated battle royales ever made. Let's get the obvious thing out the way. Yes, it looks different. You're not dropping into some ultra realistic military battlefield. You're an animal. You're running around a map and you're shooting other animals. But here's the thing, I think that's actually part of the reason this game works, because it doesn't try to be another Warzone, it doesn't try to be another PUBG, it has its own identity, and once you stop looking at what the game looks like and actually pay attention to how it plays, that's when it gets interesting. What surprised me wasn't the fact that I could play it, it was the fact that I actually wanted to play another game after finishing one, and then another, and then another. You know, when you tell yourself, I'll just have one more game, and then suddenly you've been playing for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That's Super Animal Royale, and I think that's one of the hardest things for a multiplayer game to achieve, because there are plenty of games that are technically good, but you don't necessarily want to keep playing them. This one, I kept wanting another match. And I don't think this is where the game gets misunderstood. Super Animal Royale isn't trying to overwhelm you with 400 different mechanics. You don't need a 3-hour tutorial. You could jump in, understand what you're doing and start playing. But that doesn't mean there's no skill involved, because once you start playing against people who actually know what they're doing, you realise there's a lot more going on, and that's where the game becomes addictive. There's a point where you stop just playing, you start recognising where players are likely to be, you start thinking about where you should move next, you start paying attention to sounds, you start knowing when a fight isn't worth taking, and you start realising that winning isn't necessarily about being the person who shoots first. Sometimes it's about being the person who makes the better decision, and when you pull off a play that you know was actually smart, that's when the game really feels satisfying. This was probably the part I expected to dislike the most, a top-down shooter. How competitive could that possibly be? Turns out, very. But it gives the game a completely different rhythm. You're constantly thinking about what's around you, you don't have the same field of view that you'd have in a traditional FPS, you can't just stare down a corridor and know exactly what's happening. You have limited information, and that creates uncertainty. You can be completely comfortable 1 second and then suddenly you're fighting for your life. And this is the part I think people miss. The game looks light-hearted, but the matches don't always feel light-hearted. Get down to the final few players and suddenly you're sitting there completely focused. You've survived all game, you've got the equipment you want, the zone is closing, you know there's another player nearby, but you don't know exactly where. And now, one mistake ends the game. That's the moment where the cartoon presentation disappears from your mind. You're not thinking about what your character looks like. You're thinking, where is this guy? And how do I win this? This is the part I don't understand. Because we've got a battle royale market where people constantly complain they aren't that good at battle royales anymore, every game is the same, I'm bored of Warzone, I'm bored of Fortnite, and then you've got Super Animal Royale just sitting there, being completely different, and hardly anybody seems to be talking about it. Maybe that's because people see the graphics and immediately dismiss it, maybe they see the name and think it's aimed at kids, or maybe people simply don't know it exists. But I think that's a shame, because if you actually enjoy battle royales, there is absolutely no reason not to try this, and perhaps that's what I like about it most. Super Animal Royale doesn't need to convince you that it's important. It doesn't need some massive cinematic trailer telling you how serious the world is. It doesn't need to pretend you're a special forces soldier. It just gives you a map, a bunch of weapons, a bunch of players, and says go on then, see what happens, and honestly, sometimes that's enough. Is it perfect? No. I'm not going to pretend it is. There are things that can be improved, and if you're expecting the scale and production of something like Warzone, you're obviously going to notice the difference. But that's not really the point. You don't play Super Animal Royale because you want Warzone, you play it because it's Super Animal Royale. And I think that's important because originality is becoming harder to find. So, could this actually be the most underrated Battle Royale ever made? I don't know if I'd go that far yet, but I will say this. I think it's criminally overlooked because underneath the unusual art style, there's a Battle Royale that is incredibly easy to get into, harder to master, and ridiculously easy to get hooked on. And maybe that's the biggest compliment I can give it. I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't even sure I was going to like it, and now I'm making a video about it. Don't judge it from the name, actually play it, because you might end up having the exact same experience I did. You load it up thinking this looks ridiculous, and an hour later, right, one more game. And that's why I think Super Animal Royale deserves a lot more attention. Is it the most underrated Battle Royale ever made? Maybe, but I definitely think it's one of them. Let me know if you played it, and if you haven't, what are you waiting for? Peace!